Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually we start these things with a hooksome, uh, grabby statistic or a fun little anecdote to ease everyone into the pool.
Get everyone comfortable.
Right. But looking at just the stack of notes and research we have in front of us today, I get this distinct feeling that easing in isn't really the vibe.
It's definitely not the vibe. And honestly, I think we need to be responsible here and put a kind of warning label on this one right up front.
A warning label like explicit lyrics.
We're like cognitive hazard. Look, usually we take a complex topic, we unpack it, and we really try to make it accessible for everyone. That's the job.
That's what we do.
But this particular deep dive, it's not for everyone. It is specifically calibrated for a very particular, and I'd say very intense, psychological profile.
The sources we're looking at, they describe this target listener as the psychologically intense, analytically gifted, and trauma-shaped mind. That's a heavy phrase.
It is. So if you're listening to this and you're maybe looking for 5 steps to a happier morning or some general self-improvement tips, you are probably going to be frustrated.
This isn't that.
This is not a motivational session. It's not therapy either. We have to be really clear about that.
It feels more like architecture. Like we're looking at a blueprint.
It is architecture. That's the perfect word. It's a structural analysis.
Oh.
If you feel like your intelligence is something that sort of happened to you rather than something you cultivated.
Ooh, say more about that.
If you feel like your ability to see patterns, to see the connections nobody else does, it's a byproduct of a fundamental lack of safety, then this is for you. We're talking directly to you.
That's a hell of a distinction. Intelligence is something that happened to you.
Most people think of being smart as a gift, right? You're kind of making it sound like an injury.
For the profile we're discussing, it often starts as an injury, or at the very least, an adaptation to one. The title we've given this whole stack of material is The Architecture of the Fracture.
A manual for the destabilized mind. Exactly.
And the core thesis here, it's honestly a bit shaking. I mean, it challenges the entire cultural narrative we have about genius or, awakening. We always picture the wise sage on the mountain, totally zen, totally at peace.
That is the Hallmark card version, yes. But the sources we're diving into today, and they range from systems theory to developmental psychology, it's quite a spread, they argue that deep insight doesn't come from peace. It comes from rupture.
From the system breaker.
That comes from the system breaking. So the central argument we're going to explore is this. Intelligence sharpens because safety failed.
Wow.
And insight forms because coherence broke.
I want to just sit with that for a second because it's heavy. Intelligence sharpens because safety failed. I have to be honest, I have a mixed reaction to that.
Of course.
On one hand, it makes a certain kind of sense. Evolutionarily, you get smarter when you're in danger. You have to. But on the other hand, isn't that a bit grim? It sounds like we're saying you're only smart because you were damaged. Are we reducing their genius to just a symptom?
And that is a crucial pushback. That's the tightrope we have to walk today. We have to be incredibly careful here. We are not saying the capacity for intelligence is damage. We aren't saying that happy, safe children can't be brilliant.
Right.
We're saying that a specific type of intelligence, a hypervigilant, pattern-obsessed, deeply piercing kind of intelligence, is very often the result of an early environment where not knowing was dangerous.
So the hardware might have been there from the start, but the trauma installed a very specific operating system.
That's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
The hardware is the IQ, the raw processing power. But the operating system, the thing that runs 24/7, scanning for inconsistencies, predicting outcomes, analyzing vocal tone, that OS was installed for warfare.
And the problem is many of these people are now, living in peacetime, but they can't turn the war software off. It's just always running in the background.
Always running. So today is about explaining the software to the machine.
It's a user manual.
It's a user manual for a machine that never got one. We're going to look at why your mind works this way, why it creates so much friction with the, let's call it the normal world, and most importantly, how to live with it without falling apart.
Without falling apart, that's the goal. Because the risk here isn't just being misunderstood, it's structural collapse.
Or structural hardening.
Yeah.
Becoming so rigid, so defended that you can't connect with anyone. That's the real danger. Those are the stakes.
Okay, let's open the manual. Section 1, the origin story. The notes refer to this as adaptive intelligence and the intelligence of an outcast.
Right, and we should just clarify, there was a typo in one of the original source texts that said outcast, like the hip-hop group, which is fun, but we're definitely talking about the social position of being an outsider.
Although, I mean, Hey Ya is a pretty complex song if you really break it down.
It really is. But let's stick to the psychology for now. To understand this mind, you have to look at the developmental environment. The text describes a developing mind that consistently lacks safety, belonging, or stability.
Okay, give me a concrete picture. What does that actually look like for a kid? Because I think people jump to the worst case scenario.
It doesn't have to be a horror movie. That's a key point. It doesn't have to be overt physical violence. It can be neglect. It can be having a parent who is an alcoholic and just completely unpredictable. One day they're your best friend, the next they're a monster.
That instability.
Yes.
Oh.
Or it can be profound isolation or relentless bullying. The key variable, the common denominator, is the absence of being held.
And we mean held psychologically, right? Like that feeling that the world is a solid floor you can actually stand on.
Exactly. The holding environment, as the psychoanalyst Winnicott would call it. When a child feels safe, their nervous system can relax, they can play. Their brain enters a state of exploration and curiosity.
But when a child cannot rely on the adults for that safety, they can't relax.
Yeah.
Ever. They have to take over the job of their own protection way too early.
That is the pivot point. That's the fork in the road. The energy that should have gone into play, into social learning, it all gets rerouted. It goes into scanning.
They become little anthropologists in their own homes.
Little spies. They study the parents. What does that eyebrow twitch mean? Does that specific footstep in the hall mean dad is drunk or sober tonight? Is mom's silence the angry kind or the sad kind?
They become pattern recognition machines, out of necessity.
Because their survival, or at least their emotional survival, depends on predicting the system. If I can predict the threat, I can avoid the hurt, or at least brace for it. So this mind learns to trust systems and patterns because it learned very early on that it cannot trust people.
And that, of course, carries directly into adulthood. It becomes the default setting.
It becomes the baseline way of engaging with all of reality. The source material lists these specific attributes of the trauma-shaped mind. They are pattern-sensitive, obviously, but also contradiction-tolerant, philosophically recursive, and emotionally intense.
Meaning-driven was the one that really jumped out at me. I feel like a lot of people say they want meaning in their life, but for this profile, it seems different. It's almost compulsive.
It's existential. It's structural. For most people, meaning is a nice to have. Oh, I have a meaningful job, or I find meaning in my family. For the trauma-shaped mind, meaning is the structural glue that keeps them from falling into the abyss of chaos.
So it's not a preference, it's a requirement.
They need to know what things mean, because if the world is random, it's unsafe. If it has meaning, it has a pattern. If it has a pattern, it can be predicted. And if it can be predicted, it can be survived.
So they aren't trying to be deep or philosophical for the sake of it. They are trying to be safe.
My depth is proof I was alone. That's the line from the notes that just hits you in the chest.
Yeah, let's talk about that. My depth is proof I was alone.
We also have this analogy in the outline of the diamond under pressure. And I have to say, I have a very love-hate relationship with that image.
Tell me why. Break that down.
Well, on the one hand, it's flattering, right? You're a diamond, you're brilliant and hard and sparkly, but it implies that the crushing weight, the trauma was necessary to make you valuable. It romanticizes the suffering.
It does. It's a narrative that says, thanks for the abuse, it made me a genius. And that feels really dangerous and, frankly, wrong.
You are absolutely right to reject that narrative. That's the trap of it. We're not here to say the pressure was good. We're not here to justify the pain. We are here to say the pressure was real, and the adaptation to it was brilliant.
Okay, so distinguish those two things for me. That feels important.
The tragedy is that a child had to suffer that pressure, full stop. The brilliance is that the child survived by turning their mind into a diamond. The adaptation is a testament to their spirit.
But the danger is in how you identify with that diamond afterwards.
Exactly. The danger is thinking that because you are a diamond, you are better than the coal, or that the pressure is what makes you worthy, or worst of all, that you don't need anyone because you're unbreakable.
Right. So the thought, I am brilliant because I am special, leads down a path towards narcissism and isolation.
Yes. But the thought, my mind sharpened because I had to survive, leads to what?
Self-compassion, maybe?
Self-compassion and a deep structural understanding. It helps you realize that this high-performance engine you've got wasn't a gift from the gods. It was a weapon you forged in a basement to protect yourself. And that explains why it feels so heavy sometimes, why it misfires.
And it also explains why this type of mind so often feels alien compared to others. The sources talk about tribal bias, or more accurately, the lack of it.
This is the real double-edged sword. Because this intelligence was built in isolation, in that outcast zone, it didn't download the standard group software.
It's running Linux while everyone else is on Windows or Mac.
Exactly. It's a perfect analogy.
Right.
Most people absorb cultural norms, social lies, the little convenient fictions, the way things are done, through a kind of osmosis. They accept them because belonging to the tribe is the primary safety mechanism for most of human history.
If I agree with the group protects me. Simple as that.
Correct. But the outcast, by definition, didn't have the group's protection anyway. They were already outside the circle of warmth. So they have absolutely no incentive to buy into the group's convenient lies.
They see through the structures that other people are relying on for comfort.
Yes. So everyone is at Thanksgiving dinner pretending not to see the giant, raging elephant of dysfunction in the middle of the room because it keeps the peace.
And this person is not just staring at the elephant, they're taking notes.
They're analyzing its biology, its weight, its diet, and the probability of it crushing the table before dessert. And they literally cannot unsee it. Their safety has always depended on seeing the truth, not on preserving the social fiction.
Which, as the notes say, makes them fantastic scientists or artists or whistleblowers, but really terrible dinner guests.
Why do you always have to make things so complicated? That's the refrain they hear their whole lives.
Why can't you just relax and let it go?
And the silent answer, the one they can never really explain, is because if I let it go, I lose my map of reality. And if I lose my map, I die. That's how high the stakes feel.
That brings us right to the texture of this mind, the way it actually processes the world. The sources call it dense perception. And this is section 2 of our outline. I want to spend some real time here because this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of how they actually experience things.
Dense is the perfect word.
Yeah.
And we need to contrast it with what we normally think of as intelligence. Standard analytic intelligence is usually about differentiation. It's about cutting things apart.
Dissection. Analysis.
Right. To understand a frog, you kill it and cut it open. You separate the heart from the lungs. You separate biology from physics. You separate feeling from thinking. We love putting things in boxes.
Boxes are safe. Boxes are tidy. They reduce ambiguity.
But the trauma-shaped adaptive mind does the opposite. It prioritizes integration. It defaults to connecting things. It has a high tolerance for ambiguity because it instinctively sees the underlying unity. It's looking for the pattern that connects.
The outline uses this example of a river. And honestly, in the notes, it's a little bit abstract. It talks about things like isomorphism. Can we unpack this in a way that doesn't sound like a math lecture?
Let's try. So imagine you and I are standing on a bridge and we're looking down at a river.
Okay. I see water moving, maybe some rocks, a tree on the bank.
Right. If you are using standard differentiating perception, you see a body of water. You might think about fish or the current, or maybe where it shows up on a map. You'd categorize it. Geography.
Oh.
Biology.
Simple. Contained.
Now, ask the dense mind what they see. They don't just see water. They see a system dissipating energy. They see the water following the path of least resistance, eroding the banks over decades, moving from a state of high potential energy to low potential energy.
Okay, so they're seeing the physics of it, the underlying principles.
But here's the isomorphism, which just means same shape.
Mm-hmm.
They look at that river, and they instantly see the same shape, the same structural pattern in how a heated argument unfolds in a boardroom.
How so?
The energy builds up, it finds the weakest point in someone's argument, the path of least resistance, and it flows through, eroding their position until the tension dissipates.
So they aren't just making a poetic metaphor like an argument is like a river. They are seeing the exact same law of physics applying to water and to a social dynamic.
Yes, that is dense perception. For them, it is not a metaphor. It is a recognition of the same underlying pattern at different levels of reality. So when they say the word river, they're accessing a kind of holographic file in their mind that contains the data for how things flow through resistance. And that file applies to blood in your veins, to traffic in a city, to time, to the arc of a story.
Wow. So if I'm with this person on the bridge and I say, it's just a river, man, stop overthinking it, I'm basically telling them to go blind.
You are telling them to delete 90% of the data they are perceiving. You're asking them to flatten a rich 3D model into a 2D drawing so that you can feel more comfortable with its simplicity.
And this explains so much about why they are so meaning-driven. It's not that they're trying to find some hidden mystical message in everything. It's that they literally cannot separate the object from its structural implications.
They refuse shallow answers because a shallow answer requires you to ignore the connections. And remember the origin story. If you ignore the connections, you are vulnerable. The more connections you see, the better your prediction model for the world. It all comes back to safety.
This also bleeds right into how they handle logic and emotion. Our culture teaches us those are opposites. You're either Spock or you're Kirk, thinking or feeling.
And the non-dual mind, the dense mind, rejects that separation entirely. It's a false dichotomy. They perceive structure and feeling as, and this is a quote from the material, the same thing at different resolutions.
Same thing at different resolutions. Unpack that for me. That's a big idea.
Think of music. What is a beautiful, heart-wrenching melody? On one level, it's just math. It's frequency intervals. It's harmonic series. It's pure logic and geometry. That's the structure. But what do you experience when you hear it?
Emotion, sadness, joy, a feeling.
Right. The math is the emotion. The structure is the feeling. You can't separate them without destroying the music. The dense mind perceives the entire world as a kind of music. The logic of a situation is the feeling of the situation. They are one and the same.
So when they have a gut feeling about something, it's not some mystical intuition. It's actually high-speed, subconscious data processing of the underlying structure.
Often, yes, it's subconscious pattern recognition. And this capacity leads directly to what the sources call simultaneity, or the both-and frame of mind.
This is the ability to hold two opposing ideas or feelings at the exact same time without needing to resolve them.
Whereas the standard mind, the differentiating mind, desperately wants either era. Is he a good person or a bad person? Is this project a success or a failure? Pick one. It reduces anxiety.
But the dense mind lives in both hands.
It has to, because it sees the whole picture. It sees that the person who was kind to them today was cruel to someone else yesterday. It means you can hold profound love and intense hate for the same person in the same moment within a single unified structure.
You can see their abusive behavior, and at the same time, you can see the deep trauma that caused their abusive behavior. You see the monster and the wounded child as one inseparable entity.
Which makes it really, really hard to just, break up with someone.
Or to hate your enemy, or to blindly follow a political party, or to join a movement without reservation, because you always see the flaw in the perfection and the shadow in the light and the utility in the flaw.
You see the whole messy, contradictory truth.
But, and here's the real rub, we don't live in a world that rewards or even understands both hand. We live in a world that demands either. Pick a side. Vote for this guy or that guy. You're either with us or against us.
And that brings us to the friction. This is section 3. This is where the pain really comes from. It's not just that this mind is different. It's that this mind's fundamental way of processing reality is diametrically opposed to the way most of society is organized.
The section title is The Communication Breakdown. And the outline uses the phrase, the violence of categorization. That feels, it's an intense word, violence. Really?
It feels violent to the non-dual mind.
Yeah.
Think about it from their perspective. If you see the world as this beautiful, intricate, interconnected web, where the river is also time and the math is also emotion, and someone comes along with a giant pair of scissors and just starts cutting it all up.
Let's just talk about the water, forget about the physics and the time metaphor. Snip.
Let's just talk about what he did, not why he did it. The why is just an excuse. Snip.
Can you just give me the bottom line? I don't need the whole backstory. Snip. Snip.
To the dense mind, that feels like mutilation. It feels like a fracture of coherence. To them, that cut, that act of isolating one piece from the whole, is a lie. You are actively destroying the truth in order to make it fit into a tidy, manageable box.
I like the analogy of a tapestry. Imagine you've woven this beautiful living tapestry where every thread connects to every other thread, and you're trying to show someone the whole pattern, and they just take a pair of scissors and cut out a 1-inch square and say, okay, let's just talk about this little blue square.
You'd be horrified.
You'd say, you just destroyed the entire picture. The square means nothing without the rest of it.
That is exactly the emotional toll, and it happens over and over again. The sources describe the result as recursive irritation.
Recursive irritation. I think I felt that, even if I couldn't name it. It's when the annoyance just feeds on itself and spirals.
Yes. Let's play it out in a real conversation. You, with your dense perception, try to explain the connection, the whole tapestry. The other person, using a standard analytic mind, gets confused or annoyed because it's too much information. So they cut it to simplify. They say, okay, just give me the bottom line.
And that makes me feel completely unseen, and it makes me feel like they're being willfully ignorant, like they're choosing to be blind. So I try even harder to explain the connection, maybe with more detail.
Which of course overwhelms them even more. So they cut harder, they get defensive. You're overthinking this. Why do you have to make everything so complicated?
And now you're spiraling. You feel like they're displaying this profound spiritual blindness, and they feel like you are being chaotic and pretentious and just difficult.
It's a trap. It's a feedback loop. And the sources call it mode conflict.
It's a structural issue, not a moral one. This feels like the most important thing for the listener to hear in this section.
It is so, so important. If you are constantly frustrated that people don't get it, it's not necessarily because they are stupid. And it's not because you're crazy. It's because their cognitive style is designed by default to split reality for safety, to make things simple, clear, and actionable.
While yours is designed to connect reality for truth, to make things predictive and whole.
The standard world splits to create safety. The trauma-shaped mind connects to find truth. That is a bumper sticker for this entire deep dive.
It really is.
And the takeaway here is brutal but necessary. If you expect an analytic, splitting system, which is most of modern society, our workplaces, our politics, to spontaneously operate in a non-dual way, you're going to hit this friction every single day of your life. You will feel fractured over and over and over again.
So what happens when that fracture is too much? What happens when the pressure gets too high and the system actually breaks down? This moves us into what feels like the core of the manual, Section 4, the hinge. And I want to slow down here because the notes throw a lot of heavy theory at us. We've got Victor Turner, Gregory Bateson, Ilya Prigogine, Robert Keegan.
Yeah.
It's like the Avengers of systems theory.
It is a heavy lineup, for sure. But the incredible thing is, they are all from completely different fields describing the exact same core mechanism, how a complex system grows, or fails to.
And the core concept that links them all is this idea of the liminal interval.
Yes. Let's break down the process of change into 3 simple steps. Step 1, rupture. The old system breaks.
Yeah.
You lose your job. You get divorced. Your worldview collapses after a crisis.
The crisis, the breakdown.
Step 2, liminality. This is the in-between, the messy middle. You aren't the old thing anymore, but you aren't the new thing yet. You're liquid. You're unformed. All the old rules are suspended.
And step 3.
Reorganization. You solidify, hopefully, into a new, more complex, more capable form.
The problem is, as humans, we hate step 2. We hate liminality.
We despise it. It feels like death. It is pure uncertainty. And this is where the danger lies. The sources describe what happens here as defensive contraction. When a mind cannot hold the anxiety of that liminal space, when the terror of not knowing becomes too high, the ego clamps down hard.
So instead of staying liquid and reforming into something better, we just freeze.
We freeze, or we revert to the old shape, but harder, more brittle. Or, and this is very common, we collapse into a simplistic ideology. We find a dogma. We find a black and white worldview that promises certainty. All men are evil. The government is the only problem. I am just a victim, and it's all their fault.
It's a psychological bunker. It feels safe, but nothing can get in or out.
It's a bunker. And this is where the biologist and thinker Gregory Bateson comes in. His work is so crucial here. He defined pathology sickness in any living system as rigidity. He said that a healthy system is flexible, it can learn. A sick system gets stuck in a recursive loop because it's terrified of new information that might destabilize it again.
So if I'm hearing you right, true psychological maturity isn't about having everything figured out. It's about building the capacity to not have it figured out and not completely freak out.
That is precisely it. The text defines conscious maturity as the ability to remain in unresolved complexity without defensive simplification.
Unresolved complexity without defensive simplification. That is a mouthful, but it's incredibly powerful. It's about learning to stay in the mess.
They use this old philosophical term, aporia, which basically means a state of profound puzzlement or suspension. If you can learn to stay in aporia, if you can stand in the middle of the fire of not knowing without immediately trying to put it out, your symbolic bandwidth stays open. You can receive new data. You can grow.
And this brings us to Prigogine. Okay, he was a chemist, a Nobel laureate. Why is a chemist relevant to my psychological breakdown? This feels like a leap.
This is my absolute favorite connection in the whole outline. Ilya Prigogine won the Nobel Prize for his work on dissipative structures. Now, that sounds complicated, but the idea is beautiful. He studied systems that are far from equilibrium. In other words, chaos.
It's like a pot of boiling water.
Exactly like a pot of boiling water. That's the classic example. Imagine a pot of water on the stove. At room temperature, it's stable. It's boring. The molecules are just milling around. As you add heat, which is a form of stress or energy, it gets more and more chaotic.
It starts to churn.
The molecules are going crazy. But here's the magic, the part that won Nobel. At a certain point of intensity, the system doesn't just get more chaotic. It suddenly and spontaneously self-organizes into these beautiful, perfectly ordered hexagonal convection cells.
Whoa. So the chaos itself forces a higher level of order to emerge.
Yes. The old simple structure had to fall apart. It had to dissipate energy in order to reorganize into something more complex and elegant. Prigazhin argued this principle applies to everything, to the formation of stars, to biological evolution, and yes, to human consciousness.
So when our listener feels like they are falling apart, when their life is chaos, they might actually be a dissipative structure encountering enough heat, enough stress to level up.
That is the radical hypothesis. The breakdown is actually the necessary energy requirement for the breakthrough. But, and this is the crucial part, that only works if you don't rigidify. If you try to clamp a lid on that boiling pot, it doesn't self-organize. It just explodes.
You have to let it boil. You have to hold the liminal space.
Which is where our last thinker, Robert Keegan from Harvard, comes in. His whole model of adult development is about this. Development requires us to tolerate disequilibrium. Can I look at my feelings rather than just being in them? Can I hold that anxiety long enough to learn from it, to allow a new, more complex self to emerge?
Okay, so we have the theory. It's a powerful theory. You have to fall apart to grow. You have to endure the liquidity of the liminal space. But let's be real. We still have to live in the world while we're boiling.
Yes.
We still have to go to the office. We still have to interact with people who are firmly solid and think we're being weird and unstable.
You do. And we can't just start explaining Prigozhin's theories on dissipative structures to our boss at the water cooler.
Sorry I'm late for the meeting, Bob. I was just undergoing a spontaneous dissipative structural reorganization. It was beautiful.
Also, I need those PPS reports by 5. No, we need practical tools. We need a user interface. And this brings us to the final part, section 5, the survival manual. The sources call this decoding social choreography.
This is where we pivot from the very abstract to the intensely practical. The listener we were talking to, this person so often struggles socially. They might diagnose themselves with social anxiety. They might just think they are fundamentally awkward or broken.
But the text offers a powerful reframe. It is not social anxiety, it is missing data.
Missing data. I love that.
It's a huge shift in perspective. The concept here is the tacit curriculum. Most people, during a relatively safe childhood, learn the unwritten rules of social interaction implicitly. They just absorb it by osmosis on the playground. They know how to play, how to tease, how to signal safety, how to flirt, how to agree without speaking.
They just know it. They were inside the circle where the lessons were being taught without words.
Exactly. But if you were the outcast, if you were the observer on the outside, busy scanning for threats, you missed that curriculum. You missed the class. You never got the instruction manual for the social dance.
So now, as an adult, you're trying to reverse engineer it explicitly, logically, while everyone else is running on autopilot, on instinct.
It's like everyone else is dancing and they can all hear the music. You can't hear the music. So you are desperately trying to mathematically calculate where to put your feet next based on watching where everyone else is stepping.
Yeah.
It is profoundly exhausting.
And it creates that niche problem we see in the notes. You hesitate in social situations, not because you're scared, but because you literally don't know the choreography you're processing.
So the solution the sources propose is radical in its own way. Stop trying to use instincts or vibe. You don't have that software installed. Stop trying to fake it till you make it. Instead, use the high-performance engine you do have. Use your system-thinking brain.
So analytical pattern mapping. Treat social interaction as pattern literacy.
Treat it like a science project or like learning a foreign language. Social interaction is an algorithm. It has rules, it has patterns, signal, response, escalation, or de-escalation or repair. Your mind is built for this.
Okay, let's get concrete. I want to role play this a little because the list of examples in the notes is good, but we need to see it in action. Let's take the classic dinner party scenario.
Okay, I like it. Set the scene.
Okay, I'm at a dinner party. I've had a glass of wine. I'm looking at the wine bottle, reading the label. Someone I don't know well says, "Oh, look at him, reading the wine label like he's studying for a final exam."
Okay, freeze frame. What does the outcast mind feel in that split second? What's the raw data?
Instant defense. Threat detected. I feel mocked. I feel like they're calling me a nerd or pretentious or that I'm trying too hard. I feel unsafe. My instinct is to prove my competence.
To correct their misperception of you.
Exactly. So I say something like, actually, I'm just checking the vintage because this particular region in France had a late frost in 2018, and it really affects the acidity of the Merlot.
The actually defense.
Yeah.
Classic. And what happens to the energy in the room when you say that?
The air just goes out of the balloon. Everyone kind of looks at their plates. I killed the vibe.
Because you treated a play signal as a data signal. You responded to the literal content of their words, not the underlying social structure of the interaction. Now let's run the pattern mapping algorithm. The Thorse calls this kind of light teasing an affiliative test. What does that mean?
An affiliative test. So it's a test to see if I'm part of the group, if I'm friendly.
Exactly. Teasing is often a bid for connection. It means I feel safe enough with you to poke you a little. It creates a tiny bit of social tension to see if you can handle it gracefully. It's an invitation to play.
Okay, so if it's an invitation to play, I need to signal safety back. I need to play the game back.
Right. You need to lower your own status slightly to show you aren't a threat. You need to show you don't take yourself too seriously. So instead of the fact about the 2018 frost, you say,
I could say, I know, I can't help it, I'm tragic. Next, I'm going to start critiquing the font choice on the label.
Boom. Connection restored, laughter, you pass the test, everyone relaxes.
That's the principle in the notes, self-deprecation as a safety signal.
Exactly. To the intense, truth-seeking mind, self-deprecation can feel like weakness. It can feel like lying. Why would I admit I'm tragic when really I'm just curious? But structurally, in the social algorithm, it is a power move. It signals, I am confident enough to mock myself. I am safe to be around. I am not a threat.
Okay, what about the other big one? The one that is so hard for this mind, the accuracy versus harmony conflict.
Not correcting minor inaccuracies.
Yeah.
This is, for many, the hardest one to learn because it feels like a betrayal of the truth.
Okay, new scenario. Someone is telling a story to the group. They say, and then we went to that great little Italian restaurant on 5th Street. And I know for a fact, 100%, the restaurant is on 6th Street.
The outcast mind's internal alarm bells go off. Error. Inaccuracy detected. Correction required. If the map is wrong, we will get lost. Reality must be defended.
So I jump in and say, oh, you mean the one on 6th Street, right?
Again, what happens to the vibe?
It just stops. The storyteller is thrown off. They feel corrected. Everyone feels a little awkward for a second. The flow is broken.
What was the actual goal of that conversation?
Nobody cares about the street name. They care about the feeling of the story. The goal was connection, bonding over a shared memory.
Correct. The goal of the conversation was bonding, not urban navigation. By correcting the factual error, you broke the emotional bond. You prioritized the data over the connection. You optimized for the wrong variable.
So the pattern to learn here is harmony preservation. Assess the goal.
Yes. Letting the minor error slide is a functional move to maintain the structural integrity of the relationship. You aren't lying or being fake. You are actively supporting the social infrastructure. It's a conscious, strategic choice.
This reframing is profound because it changes the internal narrative from I am broken and socially anxious and I can't talk to people to I am a high-performance engine that was designed for a different terrain and I now need to manually learn the rules of this new road.
It's not about changing who you are. It is not about becoming a shallow person. It is about building an interface. You have this complex, dense, non-dual operating system. The world mostly runs on a simpler binary operating system. You need to write an API, a translation layer, that allows you to interact with the world without crashing your own system or theirs.
It is slower to learn consciously. It takes more energy, but it is possible.
It is absolutely possible. And frankly, once this type of mind learns the patterns, they often become better at social interaction than the naturals because they see the mechanics, they see the code behind the display. They can become social architects rather than just participants who are running on instinct.
We've covered a lot of ground. I mean, from the origin of this intelligence and a lack of safety to the dense integrative perception it creates, to the intense friction with a binary world, and finally, to these very practical skills needed to survive. I want to try and synthesize this for our listener.
The whole journey we're describing here is a move from isolation to integration. The dangerous part isn't being an outcast. Many of the most important thinkers and artists in history were outcasts. The dangerous part is believing that being an outcast means permanent, inevitable exile.
My depth is proof I was alone. We want to change that sentence. We want to give it a new ending.
We want to move it to a question. Can this brilliance, this depth, coexist with belonging? That is the crucial shift. You don't have to perform a lobotomy on yourself to fit in. You don't have to pretend you don't see the patterns. You just have to learn how to translate those patterns into a language the world can receive and when not to speak at all.
And crucially, you have to learn to hold that liminal space inside yourself when the translation fails, when you are misunderstood, to not immediately collapse back into bitterness or defensive rigidity.
That is the ultimate test of maturity for this mind. Can you hold the fracture open without letting it shatter you?
I want to leave the listener with a final thought here. We've talked a lot today about survival, about coping, about building an interface. But is there something more? Is there a purpose to this beyond just getting by?
The final provocative thought is this. What if the fracture you feel, that sense of being broken, of being split from the world, of not belonging, what if that isn't a sign that you are failing? What if it is the exact mechanism required for the next evolution of your own consciousness?
Say more about that. That feels big.
Most people are held together by the glue of social safety and consensus reality.
Yeah.
You are broken open by a lack of safety. But that opening, that fracture, is also an aperture. It's a way for more information, more of reality in all its complexity to get in. Think about the mycelial network, the fungal network under the forest floor. It lives in the dark, it eats decay, it's invisible to most. But it is the thing that connects the entire forest.
So the outcast isn't actually outside the system. They are the hidden connective tissue underneath it.
Precisely. And so the real question is not, how do I fix the fracture? The question is, how do I inhabit the space within the fracture without closing it down out of fear? How do you learn to live in that liminal space and see it not as a wound, but as a doorway?
You aren't brilliant because you're unnatural. You're brilliant because you adapted.
Exactly. You adapted once to survive the trauma of the past. Now you must adapt again to survive the demands of your own brilliance in the present.
To everyone listening who sees themselves in this mirror, you have the map, or at least the beginnings of one. Now you just have to walk the territory.
Take your time. It's a dense world out there.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.
Stay open.